going to be talking about the Levitator Type 2. Basically, this board is based off the original Levitator. That was probably one of our best-selling longboard nose riders for at least 3 or 4 years. And I wanted to do some changes. Some elements of that board I really liked. That I wanted to keep. That's why I kind of evolved it to the Type 2. I wanted to keep the outline and the essence of the board, but get away from it being such a, a nose rider. I wanted to be a little bit more versatile on the tail. Basically, the differences I did on the board. The original Levitator was pretty wide. Like most of them were, from 9.2 to 9.10, they were 23 3/4. These, like at 9.6, it's about 23.5. So it's a little bit narrower, but it's also a little less parallel. There's more overall curve in the whole outline. But the main thing that I wanted to maintain was the wide point forward. So the wide point's kind of more up in through here. And what that does is it just trims, like you can stand here and the board just flies. It's just got it's got more forward width, so it has that trim, and that kind of helps it nose ride really well. The other aspect aesthetically I really liked was the pointier nose. They both have the pointy nose. This one, it doesn't look like a full nose rider. You wouldn't want to, you wouldn't probably go up there and hang parallel 10s on this board. It's not like the Continental has more of a blunt, rounder nose. So yeah, that's the main thing I kept from the original Levitator. The rocker is flatter in the tail and doesn't have. I eliminated the step deck. Step deck worked good, but I felt like you had to explain to people how it worked, and some people didn't understand it quite so well. But it did function pretty good. At times, it would flex a little bit and push a little water on your paddling. So that was kind of another reason to eliminate it. So the overall rocker is just a nice consistent curve with a little acceleration in the nose and tail. There's not a ton of rocker in this board. It was meant to be fairly flat, but enough to where you're not looking at the nose while you're paddling into a wave thinking, am I going to purl or not? And then when you're putting an edge in the tail, like a really slight edge, you don't want a lot of tail rocker, because then the board's outline and length doesn't complement the turn. It needs to be like a nice smooth curve, so it makes a nice arcing turn that complements like a 9.6 with the wide point semi forward. The other goal of the outline was not to make it look like a super wide nose coming into a really narrow tail like a high performance longboard or something. I wanted to keep it somewhat looking parallel, more for aesthetics and also functional, which I think it took me a lot of work to get this outline really dialed in, because the first generation I made of this, it was wider in the nose and it just looked too heavy in the front and pulled in too much. So I redid the model and redid the outline, and I was much happier with it. It took a little bit of the nose riding out, but overall I think this board focuses a lot on its turning ability. It's really where I wanted to shift its strength from being just another nose rider, because we have so many new nose riders like the Beacon and the Continental that I didn't want this to be another nose rider. Even though we kept the name Levitator, it really is more of the essence. I wanted to keep the essence of the outline rather than like the nose riding Levitator aspect of the board. So that was kind of a sticky point for me at first, but I feel like it nose rides good enough to where it could be called a Levitator. So I want to talk about the bottom contour. The thing that's unique that I did put in this board to make it nose ride a little better was I added instead of like there's two reasons why I did this. It's a rolled V. It's not a panel V. And what the rolled V does is, you can see it just rolling, it's rocking. It's not like a panel where it would be like that, right? So what a panel V wants to do, it wants to sort of like engage and just like go to rail and just be almost kind of tracky or like kind of performance-y. Whereas if it's rolled, it does two things. It rolls in the turn nice and smooth. It feels like a traditional board without an edge, but it has an edge, so you have a lot more drive to get around sections. What this board really does well is it just flies around sections. Like if it's a steeper beach break, you know, and you want to ride a 9.6, it's like this thing will do it. It's probably the one board in the line that's still traditional, but will still have, like, I guess you would call it high performance aspects, but not feel high performance. The other thing, the reason why I did this this rolled bottom was that the curve going this way acts to suck down the tail. So if it's panel V, the water will shut off, right? And it won't like lift the board in the nose. So, but when it's curved, the water kind of sucks down and holds the tail down, and helps the nose riding. So with having a less tail rocker, you lose the nose riding ability of the tail rocker sucking the tail down. So instead, like, I put this roll in to give it that nice kind of ball bearing feeling turn, but also to help it nose ride, because the water on the edge wants to release, but the curve here kind of sucks the tail down. It's a different feel. It's not like your typical nose rider, but it's not meant to be strictly a nose rider. Like I said, this board, I really moved the emphasis back on the tail. So that it's a great turning board. The edge really is only to about 18 inches up. I mean, it's not like a really, you know, abrupt edge. It just kind of goes from hard right back in the tail, and it just kind of rolls into like a 60-40 rail in the middle. So like trims really well. It's low in the water, so it still feels like a traditional board. You'll, like when you're surfing this part of the board, it's going to feel like a sort of a nose rider. It just feels sort of stable and will just trim along, especially with the Y point moved forward. And there's quite a bit of roll in the middle. Not a ton, but more than you would find on a performance board, but less than you would find on, like, say, the Continental. For sure, the Continental has a lot more. And then we get into like the concave and the nose, and it's just more forward. The concave ends about 2 feet back, and that's just enough to basically, when you're getting over the concave where the nose starts pulling in, it's still lifting. It's giving you, but you definitely got to be in a pocket. Like the board, it needs to be in the steeper part of the wave to get this board to nose ride. It's not going to be like, go right to 5 when the wave is barely breaking and you're cruising through it. And it's like where the Continental would be the board for that. I did go a hair thicker throughout the range of boards. I mean, in the 9.2, 9092, they're normal thicknesses, but the widths are wider than, say like the Izzy Rider, the new, or the Pintail lightweight Type 2. This is quite a bit wider, so it's more in the width spectrum of, like, say, a Beacon or a Continental. So you get the benefit of all that paddling and glide of a wider board, but you have the performance in the tail. I feel like the wider boards people are really liking. Just for all around, like you can ride this board from, like, say a 2 foot day to like head high, where I wouldn't tell somebody to ride a Continental and anything over shoulder high. It's just gonna feel like a tank, just too much board. So this definitely has got a bigger range of use. It's gonna ride a lot more diversity of waves. You can ride chunkier beach breaks, like on the East Coast or on the West Coast, whatever, like shorter interval. You're going to be able to turn it quicker in the pocket and make directional turns and stay in the wave if the waves are kind of like, if it's like a wind swell. And then when it's a little bigger and chunkier, you're going to be able to, it's going to still feel like you can control it. You know, relative to its size, I mean 9.6, so you know, you definitely don't want to go too big. The waves on a board this big, but yeah, this is the basic elements of the Levitator 2. I feel like when I designed it, I wrote it, and I made that one change on the outline, and I feel like I'm really happy the way this came out. And I feel like most people that ride it know what they want. They want a board that has that really like drivey, you know, squirt in the turn to get around sections. It's kind of what this board will do really well, and trim really nice and fast and effortless. So yeah, that's the Levitator 2.